Thanks, Debs. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank everybody for joining. I can see some old faces that we haven't seen for a while, Hans Holgren and John O'Gorman. And today's a special day because it's we are reviewing Mark Wobben's book. I believe it's your first book, Marco.
It is. It is.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So we really look forward to that. And he was just sharing all the war stories and the difficulties of getting your first book through. So I still need to go through that process, and I do look forward to it, but not too much anymore after the last. So the thing we like to do from Dame Safka to support the author and to get it out there is that we will ask Marco to select the person that has either stumped him or asked one of the most appropriate questions about his book. And we will get you a free copy of his book. And so it's a nice giveaway. And for those who will just engage, that would be fantastic. Marco, over to you, sir. And welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Howard. And thank you for pointing me at choosing a prize winner in this session. Again, there was a little bit confusion. I have builders running around in my house, unfortunately. So if the audio fails at some point, just text me or so that I'm aware of that. I hope the noise cancelling will allow my voice to get through and block some of the background noises. So just to let me know. If that really doesn't work out, I'll just have to fire them. Let's see how I can share my slide deck here. It needs to be a window. I think this should be working. Am I right? Good. Okay. Howard's already on mute. Waiting my story here. yeah. There was some horror involved in writing a first book. I have never experienced anything like it. Trying to summarize over 2 decades of experience is not easy, and I try to keep it light for the new audience of information modeling using business communication. The title Just the Facts was borrowed from a TV series where an investigator just it keeps interviewing all kinds of people around murder cases, and all these people instantly start talking their life stories, whereas the inspector says, just the facts, please, just the facts. So, and that is something that is very close to heart for me, because as soon as we are able to communicate facts, things become a lot clearer, strangely enough. You may have heard some of my stories before, especially at Dama, South Africa. I think this is my fourth presentation, so there might be some older recordings online, and I'm sure Howard and Debbie are more than happy to share them or reshare them. Let's start with some of the facts, because we hear data all over. We have more data than ever. We have more need for data than ever. We have more data products than ever, and strangely enough, we have more regulations than ever before, and even more tech than ever before. So we're in a very challenging time, and we're still trying to understand each other. So how does that all come together? And you may see a lot of cartoons in my slide deck, which are also included on some of the pages in the book. It's one of the many things that I do to deal with my day-to-day agitation, frustration, and surprise. So prehistoric data exists. We can occasionally find them in cave paintings, etc. But primarily, information was exchanged in a manual way, not on paper, not necessarily using computers. And the recent history introduced the mechanical parts of it, the printing press. This is a picture of a pneumatic system using the user, probably banks have had them a lot, so they could transport information and checks and money from a secure vault. And nowadays, as we all know, we transport data or information electronically. It comes with its own challenges. The speed of distribution is just one of them. And throughout that, I encounter again and again that the next tech is going to solve our problems. And really, technology, like as some companies would like to make you believe, is technology is the solution. To me, I perceive it's a tool for a temporary problem, because as soon as it's being solved, other problems will arise and new tools will be needed. And even despite the fear that AI is going to take over society, even after 4,000 years, tools still need humans to do the work. So we have nothing to fear. And of course, this is a little joke, reverse psychology, because if AI still needs us to work, who's the slave and who's the master in this? But okay. And continuously, the promise is that with technology, everything is possible. And a few decades ago, Google came up, and it's like they have this one entry box, and you can search the entire internet. So we want all our systems to be that simple. And with tech, everything is possible. So why are we not accomplishing that? Well, not many people actually realize that it actually takes many, many, many years and a lot of effort to make it as simple as Google and to make all that technology work together. This is not we pull it out of a box and have it up and running next week. So the current state of affairs in consultancy, that you hire expertise, they come in for 2 to max 4 years, and then they leave again. They do not know how to really push an organization decade after decade. So that effort needs to be addressed. It's not going to be an easy fix. And we've all read the cartoon, Agile, great, that's going to add value tomorrow or next week or in the next sprint. But if you want to maintain that over a decade to reach the level of professionalism, you need architecture in there as well. So there's a combination of tech, really know what you're doing, and plan ahead. But we're talking about data. So what happened after a few years of automation, buying purchases, building databases, is that we have disparate data. We built silos everywhere, and they all have data, but they all have a different context, which created the data. And as architects, we're trying to manage that and make sure that it doesn't run off the cliff. And that is really hard work. And one of the many promises is the modern days of data lakes. If we push everything that we have into one place, we could make this work. But just looking a few decades back, when was storing everything in one place ever a good idea? Because we don't know anymore what's being stored there. We don't know the source, we don't know the context by which the data was originally created, and then we have to start fishing for the meaning, and that might take another lifetime. Whereas the technology introduced, it's a quick fix. Let's do this. And what we tend to forget is that we still need to deliver the effort to make sense of it. That is something that will always be there. So managing all the little parts in your car, then the question is, can you still drive it as a whole? Can you manage every little component in your organization, and does that still allow you to operate the organization as a whole? Probably not. managing every individual part does not give you the coherence as a whole that you also need to make it work. And here's the thing, and some of you might recognize that, is that if I want to do my job, I will try to support my efforts by writing little memos so that if I come back into the office the next day, I can still remember what I was working on. When a customer has a request, I will write down the request and I will write down the person and what I need to do to get back to this person. So I'm basically creating data from the context of my personal work. And this is where the scaling comes in, because as soon as I have a team of developers or co-authors or whatever, I need to write the notes in such a way that someone else who picks up the note from my desk knows what the original context was with which the note came. As soon as I put it in a computer, I still have that specific context. But if somebody just pulls the data, that context might no longer be there. Similarly, if I'm looking at an inventory, and we have a wonderful definition for that, is the amount of articles that we have in store that we can trade, etc., then the context of the warehouse might not necessarily be there. The context of the purchasing department for new articles might not be there. The context of the sales department might not be necessarily there. So just looking at the data, we're missing context. And the context comes with a very specific language. And again, this is one of the challenges that we have when we're talking about there's more data, more needs, more data products, more tech. And we're still missing the parts that make it understand. Now, you've probably all seen similar pyramids. And I have one in the book. And it kind of looks like this. We have tokens like 20221222, and it doesn't mean anything. Then we have something called data, which is, oh, wait a minute, we're talking about a date. It's the 22nd of December in 2022. Now it becomes information if we can actually work with that. So basically we need context with that. We need to know what that date actually is and with what context it came. So as soon as we say, you know, this is the 22nd of December and it's a winter's day, we add context, or we added context. And of course, the knowledge would then be, okay, wait a minute, that's 3 days until Christmas. So with any meaningful wisdom, we need to run to the store to get milk and cookies, otherwise we might not end up with a gift. Now, this pyramid makes perfect sense, but what is the thing that we do in IT is we want to execute on wisdom, and we need an information system for that. So, you know, we go from wisdom to buy milk and cookies. We go down the pyramid, and we remove the insight, and we have knowledge. We remove the meaning of it. We have information. We remove the context, and then we have data. And if we remove syntax, then we just have a bunch of tokens. Then we need a machine and we need a technical format to even understand what the data is. So there are different layers. And what I find interesting in this whole challenging time is that we strip a lot and we think that it's just data. So as soon as we put it in a database, we lost insight, meaning, and maybe even context. If we pull that data out of the database and store it in a data warehouse, we lost the context, definitely. And then you see that even downstream, where we store everything into a data warehouse, data lake, or whatever, all we're trying to do with all that raw data is to find the context, find its meaning, so that the management can recreate insights. And my continuous question is, why do we remove all that to break it down into data? I find that is an interesting question that I haven't figured out myself entirely just yet. So, and everything is therefore subjective. I recently posted an article that the truth doesn't exist. We have facts. We can agree upon it or not. And if we agree, then we have something called intersubjectivity. Because I look at facts from my perspective, someone else looks at facts from their perspective. And we're both being subjective. As soon as we agree, we create something called intersubjective. Small sideline in there is, of course, if scientific facts are repeatable, then you could argue that it's subjective. But basically, we're all humans, so we can assume that we're subjective. We do our work, and our colleague does their work, and in a large organization, everybody does their work, and they're all coming from a different perspective and context. And yet, the data that flows through to make my work possible and make the work of colleagues workable and usable, it requires something called communication. Just teaching the business how to talk tech might not be the best idea, because if I'm talking to a brain surgeon and I need a data warehouse so that they can monitor his patients or whatever, then there's no point in trying to make this person understand data. We need to facilitate something that he can speak his own language and his own expertise. Similarly, I see trends that if we can produce enough data products out of the raw data, then the business will be happy. So I question that as well, because they're not looking for data. They want answers. They need information. So they need something else. And interestingly enough, usually they've given that already through simply doing the work. So within that communication, are we really communicating what we need? Or is it just, are we trying to express what we want? And again, these are philosophical questions, but they hopefully make you look at data slightly different. Yeah, and anticipation. You're not quite sure how it will turn out, but you need something and you trust the expert and you hope everything will work out. But I've seen many times is that as soon as you're in an interview, that usually even the domain experts don't always quite know how things should be done. So instead of building technical solutions for domain experts, we should really try to engage more with those experts to make them able to communicate clearly amongst themselves before we start doing it as data or as tech or as this is your solution or this is what you asked for. And one of the ways to deal with that is to support a method called factor-oriented modeling. So trying to work with facts, but in the language of the business. Otherwise, we end up with miscommunication. As soon as you need something, you cannot talk to an alien, you don't speak the language, you don't share the terminology, then you have a problem. And of course, I can refer to the Rosetta Stone, where scientists were trying to figure out how the Egyptian hieroglyphs worked until they found this stone in 1799. Nobody really understood what they were talking about. And you can assume that the business doesn't understand tech, whether that's a logical diagram or a UML diagram or JSON files. They just want to do their work. Vice versa, interviewing a brain surgeon and get all his decades of knowledge and expertise in a simple format is hard as well. So we need to close that bridge of communication. And I use this slide because we all kind of looking at translation engines on large language models and AIs because they're going to solve it for us. Another tech who's going to do it for us. Just to showcase how that works is that this is real life. This is what we're dealing with. My dog has a hangover. He's drank my bottle of beer or whatever it was, or the whiskey that Mark didn't drink this evening. If we run that through translator into German, it says mein Hund hat einen Kater. And when we translate that back to English, we will end up with something very funny that says that my dog has a cat. And this happens really because we're looking at the text and we're not taking into account the context. So being able to communicate with people and understanding the context is very crucial. It cannot just simply be automated. And a little cartoon that does something similar, funnily enough, is that, do you talk? Yeah, but I have no idea what you're talking about. And you can see that in the hallucinations of AI or ChatGPT nowadays. It does not question itself. But as soon as you question it, it says, oh, sorry, yes, you're right. So it still doesn't question itself. It just repeats more patterns. But we as humans have a troublesome item as well, is that, we all know this whispering game. It is very hard to clearly communicate in a way that even down the line, it will still hold up. It gets lost in execution. With the inventory, I've seen people, with the inventory example, I've seen people say, okay, we got the definition right, we know what it means, and then looking at the numbers, they're wrong because the purchasing added some numbers because it already ordered some articles. Then the sales department subtracted a few articles because it was already sold. And then the warehouse people look at it, it's like, well, I only have 3 on the shelf. So what are you guys talking about? So even in that human communication, things might get a little obfuscated. And that creates data as a liability. It might not just be the data that you think the data is, it might be something else, and that creates risk. And unfortunately, excuse me, unfortunately, we had a few disasters here on a national scale with subsidies and families getting subsidies to take their kids into daycare, where the data was interpreted as in they were potentially being fraudulent because it wasn't taken into the right context, which led to marriages falling apart, kids being placed in custody, and where they saved maybe hundreds of thousands of euros, repairing all the damage done to human life is actually costing millions at this point. So data as a liability is very real. And it all comes from misunderstanding, miscommunication, not understanding, etc., etc. So what we're really trying to accomplish is that throughout the departments, throughout systems, throughout the communication about the data, we really need to figure out how to standardize our vocabulary and how to align our work with that vocabulary. Because that supports and does not solve, but it supports that we can start working to communicate as one organization. And this is a continuous battle because there will always be chaos and there will always be phases of order. So the immediate benefits of being able to do that is that it creates business improvements. It forces the clear communication and the meaning. It identifies as business inconsistencies that are very real. Different approaches, and I think Remco Broekmans talked about it as well. It allows you to have your stakeholders work in a predefined manner so that they can do their consistent work as well and actually contribute. It comes with its natural context because people are forced to talk about things as in facts. And if they have a hard time formulating facts about data, then they might not be the expert in the first place. And we might need to talk to some more colleagues. The whole approach, it will start supporting your governance, your lineage. It will support your work, the model or workflow in itself. You can link all kinds of external document systems with that. And in the book, I actually show how that is done. So I've got various diagrams and stories there. And I think despite the amount of tech and tools out there, I think the fact that it's supported by the FCOAM methodology, which is fully communication oriented information modeling, it takes the approach to an entirely different level and putting it really into the hands of the domain experts themselves, instead of me as a modeler draw diagrams and do it in an abstract way without documenting the process of understanding. Howard, did you want to interrupt? You're on, I'll unmute you, maybe you.
On your previous screen, you spoke about business homework with CBC forms. And
Right.
there was a question as to what are CBC forms?
Oh, good question. Let's see, can I go back to that slide? Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
So there are three compartments. Yeah, so what are CBC forms? Core business concept forms. It's an abbreviation mentioned by Remco. It's explained in the book. So to explain some of the gathering process of the information modeling that needs to be done is that there are different ways to interview the domain expert. And the approach that Remco is promoting is one of the many forms that they have is the core business concept form. It's basically stating what are the most important things in your organization, and it allows them to name it. For instance, it could be the customer, which is a little nebulous in itself, but then they can start filling in the form. What are the most common attributes about your customer? What are the definitions for that? And this CBC form is almost kind of like a poor man's dictionary, but it allows you to gather a lot of information from a domain expert without having a very rigid and formal approach, without having to go to a very technical diagram notation, without going through many different methods. It's just a very high level, almost like a whiteboard. People can just fill in how they see things. And it helps in the gathering process because then you can start focusing on the important stuff. You can get back to it. You can interview these people. So the CBC forums is that really it allows you to start a modeling session and give people homework. Here's the form. Can you please complete that? And that's just one of the ways to gather information and push that down into the pipeline of actually building such a rich information model that supports all of the things that I mentioned before that we need to solve. Does that sort of help? Yep, good. Slides. Okay, so how not to speak. Just a few examples again from the book, because we're talking about facts. And to make things clear, it also gives a few examples of what is not a fact. And first of all, the non-atomic ones is that it says, well, patient 659573 has first name Tom and surname Harvey. Those are not atomic. We could split it up and says patient 659573 has first name Tom. A different fact would be patient 659573 has surname Harvey. Those are atomically separated facts. Non-concrete is basically saying, we're being abstract, we're being conceptual, we're not talking about the actual values that we're dealing with in our work, in our data administration. So patient has a first name. Yeah, on a type level, we can all understand that, but we haven't figured out how we identify a patient. So even saying that a patient has had a checkup on 1st of January 2018 is still rather nebulous because we don't know which patient again. So as somebody communicates this, we as humans assume that we understand the context. But without being concrete, we have a very hard time verifying that. You could also state a customer has bought a product, but it doesn't tell us anything. And we use it in IT to build systems because we can do abstract things with computers, but it doesn't support the actual data administrative needs of the employee that needs to write down values and in a specific context to do this person's work and be able to communicate it in a concrete way with colleagues. And another one, non-unique. Tom is male. Well, that's great, but there might be more than one Tom. Tom Harvey has a checkup on 1st of January 2018. Same thing. There can be many Tom Harveys. And even the date might not be specific enough because we might need a date and a time with that. So all of those is very important when you want to be very precise in your communication.
Sorry, Marco.
Yes.
There was just a question about different languages. What happens if the business users speak different languages? I know you do support that. But
yes, wonderful. Oh, let me answer that on the next slide because that's a good question. Interesting. If you look at a lot of theoretical research, which is on these kind of things and on tech and on programming languages, you will find that it is primarily focused on English. In the Netherlands, as you might know, we're a relatively small country. We do a lot of trade with different countries, and in the past we had to speak more than just Dutch because nobody speaks Dutch. Well, you do. At least you understand the Dutch.
Yes, you're right.
I don't know if you actually still speak Dutch. It's starting to become its own language,
different.
right? Yeah. So here's the interesting part. I've talked with banks. They said, well, we need a solid data model. I said, okay, let's start talking about what you actually need. What do you, if you talk amongst each other, what do you speak? What is, in your words, the facts about the data? And they start speaking in Dutch, which is great. But then you hit the department that does international transactions, and they have a whole different set of regulations in English. So suddenly the information model is part Dutch, part English. And if you're touching base in an international organization that has companies in different countries, they might speak more than just two languages. So one of the interesting part is, and I'll show you that on the next slide, is even though that we speak in facts in our natural language, it boils down to two things. There is structure in the fact, and then there is syntactic grammar and words in the fact. And in my jargon, it's called soft semantics and hard semantics. The hard one is the structure. The soft semantics is the words that are used to describe the types and the words that are used to form a sentence. And here you can instantly see, if you look at the bottom left part, that there is a structure and all of those individual parts can be translated. So with the similar structure, I can reorder things, but the coherence is the same. I can change the order of it, but the hierarchy within it will remain the same. So on a tool level, we solved it by doing either type level dictionaries or allow different soft semantics to be verbalized. So we can express the same fact in different languages, in different ways of saying things. And for an example, I can say customer 1 buys article 1, but I can just as easily say article 1 is bought by customer 1. I speak a different language, if you will, but I'm communicating the same fact. And this is the translation parts as implemented in a tool, and my last slide will say something about it, is beyond natural language, because you can also do technical translations. I see that I might actually have to hurry up a little. Let's see where I am. I have to hurry up a lot. Okay. So the challenge is to express the data in a way that it's usable throughout your systems. And as tech, we're doing metadata abstract, but it still always needs to tie in with the language, because it starts with language and it ends with language and it supports the language. So we should not strip it. And we can do this from a high level conceptual diagramming, but we can present that in different ways, but it needs to boil down to something very concrete. And I'm just showing you some diagrams from the book, whether that is a concept and container-like diagram that does a high-level description of what is the domain. I can do hierarchies, ontologies, taxonomies, legal article annotations. We have a lot of articles like any country, but in the Netherlands, we can actually download all of those in as XML files. But those need to be annotated, because it only describes what the government organizations should do, but it doesn't always tell you how to execute it. So somehow you need to distill that, make annotations to it, come to an information model, and then start building tech. Once you have all the grammar in place, something like a logical diagram can easily be generated. But this is hard to verify. So we need, again, the language. So one of the things that our tool does with this approach is it brings forward the communication of the end user. And here you can see that with the touch of a button, I could translate it to any language, because all of the words and all of the expressions are there. And if it's translated, I can present it in English, in Dutch, in German, in French, but also in Tech Talk, and giving the tables SAP identifiers, etc. So different variations, if you'd rather have UML for our developers, or, this slide is taken from the book. It shows how a very rich information can be slowly compressed in something more technical. And you can see through the steps here that they start with a very rich environment, and it boils down to the last bit at this page that says patient. And it has 3 parameters: first name, patient number, and city name, which resembles your typical database table. And this is one of the few steps that allow you to transform a model. Business constraints, of course, are very directive in this process. Not null constraints, unique constraints, and all of that. Those drive whether a fact will become a table in itself, it will become an attribute in a table, or a column in a table in this case, or just a foreign key to a different table. But it doesn't change the semantics. It doesn't change really the structure. Another point in the book is, and how do you line that up with lineage and governance? Usually somewhere in the middle, it should be that anchor point that says, okay, this is how the business views the data. And whatever source system it is, I need to align it with the meaning, and then I can start building data warehouses on top of that. And vice versa, as soon as I have modeled my business knowledge, I need to know in what system it actually is stored. So the whole lineage governance comes very close to the meaning of the information. There are plenty of examples on how that translates to all kinds of tech, SQL, JSON, Python code, but also if you're more into the AI and LLM, it generates readable code for language models to be trained based on your information model. So it actually starts learning your semantics and your jargon. It has a little paragraph or an example in there that says, okay, so this is how we start supporting the AI, our ChatGPT extensions. It can actually provide you with a decent business case description from your information model. And more interestingly enough, it can help you prompt for questions to investigate further into your information model and into the business. And I think that is even more valuable than any answer that it can generate because you're the expert in this. So how is ChatGPT going to help that? But as an expert, you might have some blind spots, or in the interview, the experts might have left something out. So actually leveraging the hallucinative parts of ChatGPT to come up with any random set of questions based on that is very helpful. And there's even an example on how to combine both the operational parts, your reference data part, or even your reference data management, because they all involve facts, either in your production environment or facts about how your production data aligns with reference data standards. And even the facts on how you manage all those reference data are something that you can capture in regular language, and they all tie together. So in a very natural fit, you are able to communicate both with business as with standardization bodies and with the architects that are responsible for the management of those. And you can build this very coherent environment. And that it illustrates that, and I think there's a quote in the book as well, as soon as you can actually talk about it, we can start thinking about it, we can start agreeing to it, and we can start building it. And that is the key that is being addressed throughout the book, where it addresses people that are not so aware of tech. It addresses people that are the architects and the modelers, and it addresses the developers that are deep into tech and code, and showcase them that they're all part of that same pipeline of operationalized communication. Now, of course, I would recommend you to get the book, but besides from that, if you're in any way triggered by these terminology, and I've seen it in the US, we in last data modeling zone, I did a similar presentation, and this slide was in there, and I was approached at the end of the session that says, okay, I had no idea what I was doing in IT, but now I get it. I need a career change. Now, I don't know if anybody of you needs that, but if you feel that you're triggered by all of this, or just a handful of those, then you might want to consider information modeling, or at least ask me a good question so you might win the book. I have a few QR codes that for those who are not winning the prize, if you use the discount code TP25, you get 25% off of the book. I talked a little bit about the tool. You can actually download a free copy on kstock.com. I've talked about it in previous sessions. You can connect through me with me through LinkedIn, or become part of the LinkedIn group to communicate further. I'll leave this slide on for a minute and then.
Okay. Marco, thanks very much. There's one question that you haven't answered, and it was from Henry, and he asked, I have a question surrounding how you can facilitate the discussion surrounding the importance of data modeling, and specifically the challenge surrounding building a sound model that is usable in the long run. Now there's quite a few more there, but I don't know, does that make sense, or would you like some further explanation?
Well, I don't have, so unfortunately, I don't have a ready-made answer. So what I find is that I'm often approached by people in the tech parts of all of this, and they're very hesitant to adopt an entirely different way of working. Because they grew up in tech. They either know the code or they know a tech tool, or so the need for them to change is not there. So what helps is either to find a place where IT is not fulfilling up to its promises. That's a very good one, because there is pain somewhere. But more promising, I think, is by experience that using the approach of communication is that you will find domain expert that will actually be relieved that they can finally talk about their work in their own language. And as soon as that starts, the information models that come out of it and depicted in diagrams, but also in text files so that they can read it at the same time, is that they instantly understand the diagram, weirdly enough. Weirdly enough, as a technician, because if I present these diagrams to people that have a tech background, they go like, okay, what does this diagram mean? Whereas if you present it to the domain expert, they will instantly recognize the jargon because they know all the words in there. And on top of that, because it's so rich in examples, they will actually recognize the data in those models. So when it comes to helping to make this part of the organization, I usually tend to find the miscommunication in an organization in the first place and try to do the minimal effort in, okay, let's write this down in facts. And as soon as you do that, and people can agree upon that, it will expose the ambiguity in their own language, and it will help them solve that ambiguity at the same time. And if you can then combine that with even with the free tool, you just simply model that in its tiniest form, people will start recognizing, hey, wait a minute, this is helpful. And that's really what you're looking at, because you need to be a very good data modeler to be able to do all of that processing in your head and come with a very accurate data model. If you're doing all the interviewing and abstraction and modeling into a data model, you would still need to write an entire document explaining the context. So there's a lot of effort that goes into the traditional way of modeling that is still very hard to verify by the business and, to be fair, with fellow technicians. I've been in conferences where I showed them a logical diagram. I said, who can verify this? And nobody raises their hand because they do not know the business context. And this is a very painful realization, really, and it's sad in a way that we're in this IT industry and we're doing this day in, day out, but we're really not addressing the business communication in the first place. We're simply just propelling it in a certain way. And it needs catastrophes before people start feeling the pain. A couple of years back, the Dutch National Bank was fined by the European Commission for a multi-million euro amount because they couldn't explain one number on the report. Everybody was looking at it like, okay, well, it adds up, but it doesn't add up with the other report. And where's the difference? And they couldn't explain it. They couldn't trace back because at some point they found data that suddenly was without context, that they couldn't explain why it was even there or what it would meant. So if you're in an organization that either feels that there might be a risk, those are the places where you need to be very active, either for data quality reasons or risk management reasons. The other part is opportunity. I may have spoken about it before. I've seen systems in the Dutch railway infrastructure organizations that managed to get their maintenance down from 4 hours to 2 seconds. They had to communicate over systems with over departments before they could send in a maintenance team if there was an incident on the track. That whole process, by aligning and standardizing communication, went down to 2 seconds. It was literally a Google Maps zoom in, click, and the system turned itself off live in 2 seconds. Everything was integrated. And this is a process that doesn't stop. The thing is, though, this is an investment that took 20 years to build. This is not a quick fix. But as soon as you have it in the backbone of the organization, you can make tremendous progress. So on a financial part, I've talked about it a couple of days ago. Investment is seen as a cost, but it's actually saving in the future. And if you can figure out how to communicate as an organization, as a whole, that is an investment that will bring tremendous savings and huge benefits in the longer run than 2 years. But you can instantly showcase it on the short term by looking at different complicated domains that really need the domain experts' input and see how they light up when they can talk about it in their own language. I covered a lot.
Thanks, Marco. Henry, just confirming that answer your question.
Yeah, Howard, I think to a certain extent, I was sort of more focusing as well on what happens when us as technical individuals have to communicate with non-technical individuals surrounding the importance of this. Because I found that in a lot of cases, when I communicate with technical individuals, they do understand, let's say, the different terminology and communication methods, or let's say that, yeah, their taxonomies that they would use in their, let's say the developers have their, I as an industrial engineer use something different. But then when it comes to non-technical individuals, they try to sort of push a lot of the times to say, oh, but this is just, let's just have a quick fix. Let's just fix it now, without having sort of the fundamentals right. And then sometimes it comes that from my personal experience, I can give you the answer, but I know that in about a year or two, you're going to turn around and you're going to sort of curse me because you say, oh, this person didn't think about it. When in actuality, it was, I try to communicate with you. We need to think about this. It's not in place. And we need to make sort of the investment in that. But yeah, that was to a large extent when I was in Norway. I worked with very, very non-technical individuals, and I was sort of the only technical individual. And that was sort of a interesting challenge, especially because they are Norwegian, so they primarily speak Norwegian. So it was not just sort of the cultural gap, but also the language gap, and then the technical to non-technical gap. But yeah, Mark gave me a great answer actually for it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, I think the important thing that gets people to start changing is the problem or the storm, the perfect storm that happens that you can justify why we need to work together. There's another question from Biraja. He asks, is there a way of ensuring consistency so that the business people and the data modelers and the developers not only understand, but consistently apply the fact-oriented modeling techniques in their daily workflows? Is there a problem of inconsistent application? I know that you generate quite a bit of the code, so you take it down to that level, Marco?
That's a good question. I don't think that is really a problem. I think that's because of how the method really works. So when you start developing a information model that can be shared throughout the organization, it really is, especially if you're in a large enterprise, it's not a single model anymore. I've seen organizations that have a dependency stack of about 25 information models. Now, those 25 information models do not align with 25 departments. They do not align with 25 data products. They do not align with 25 databases. The information model architecture, if you will, is about information dependency. And every fact that is being expressed and verified and agreed upon builds that landscape of information models. And since any application development is usually not just built in installation, it needs to be built to support work with other people. And as soon as you do that, it needs to integrate with the jargon. It needs to integrate with the information model that is already there. So the application development is actually starting to become better and better because it aligns with a bigger body of knowledge throughout the organization. So I haven't seen where this is actually producing inconsistency. It's actually taking away a lot of inconsistencies.
So Marco, maybe for me to understand, let's say you've built those 25 information models in different business units that have some level of expression of the facts.
Right.
That are you saying that as you prepare that the creation of the information model, that you're extending it wider to reach those other areas, and what happens if you don't? So what happens if you're really just focusing on those people that have a different language across business units, different way of speaking?
So I have a slide somewhere, and I'm not sure if I don't think it was in my presentation. Is that so? You have different levels of information modeling or language use, really. Is that you have language that is shared throughout the organization, and it's simple as the employee has an employee number, and this employee has a first name and a last name. So those are very common definitions and fact uses that work throughout the organization. Then you have departmental jargon that maybe doesn't even do something with employees. And then you might have departments that are very specific goal driven, like taking biological samples out of a production chain or whatever. Just so specific, it only works for one little purpose. And there is when you look at those kind of information structures as in what is the interdependency of that information, you have to separate the common language, the shared language, and the very specific language. And viewing your information models through those glasses or binoculars or whatever metaphor you want to, it will give you a different look on how things are interdependent. So it's not focused on a specific, it's not focused on sales department. It's not focused on production department. It's not focused on the web database. It's really how does the information through the organization depend on each other.
Okay.
So is there any data in your organization that does not register the actual person or user that created the data? If the answer is no, then that piece of information about this user or this person, that is something that is already jargon that is shared throughout the enterprise. So that would be one of the most used and reused piece of information. When it comes to production of articles, you might find those throughout a couple of departments. Sales, production, warehouse, that kind of stuff. But the HR might not even care. So again, you see the breakdown of dependency. I have the staff that is working everywhere, and then I have articles that are products that are only in specific departments. So it breaks down into assets and functional stuff. So looking at your information dependency through that is helpful. And then the interesting part comes is like as soon as you build all that knowledge base, is then now we need to build an application. Now, for instance, we build a loyalty application for our employees that get a certain discount if they buy our own products. Now, we're pulling information from the HR, we're pulling information from the product, and then it becomes its own domain where it reuses underlying concepts. And the application can be very specific. That's fine, but it leans and builds on common language that was defined independent of an application.
Sure.
Because it's really the information that we need to communicate as an organization, as a whole.
So it's almost like an enterprise model that you're building, and then you extracting it for application purposes.
Right. But you do it knowledge domain by knowledge domain by knowledge domain, and you
Right.
make them align, because that's we need to work together. That's the whole purpose of all of this.
Okay. And then Mark asked the question, can you explain how this approach would work with an agile method?
Ah, interesting. Yeah, so the philosophy of Agile is that we add value, or try to add as much value in every step that we take. If we are, and we're doing, Agile is usually focused very quickly on, okay, software development, right? Okay, we need to build another screen, another report. We'll work through it as we go, and et cetera, et cetera. But every piece of data that is used there, that is being added to the screen or to the report, should be able to have a fact that expresses what that data means. So whatever you do in Agile approach is that you take it in small steps, you do it in small sprints, in storylines, etc. But it very much ties in with, are we doing the work, and can we verify it with the domain expert? Because that's usually the direct line. It's your product owner, your stakeholders, all of that lines up in that effort of an Agile approach. So every piece of data that's being tracked, handled, added, changed, or whatever, it requires just one fact expression. So every element is added one step at a time, and it's documented one step at a time, and it's verified one step at a time. And there you see it adds value as soon as you add a verified fact instantly.
And the fail fast?
And fail fast. Huh. Well, this is interesting. If we cannot agree upon the fact, it failed. So the fail fast is instant, because if we can add shit to it and have it unverified. So where does it fail? It fails when it gets verified. The thing is, if you start with facts, you as an expert express it, I can check with your colleague. Do you agree on this fact? Is this how you communicate about that data? If that verification process is not there, there's your fast failure instantly.
Yeah.
And on top of that, and this is where the tool comes in, is if I want to introduce a different way of administering our customers. We have customers with customer numbers, and that works great. And I'm starting to introduce a new fact that says customer with email address me@example.com. Then instantly the tool, even on a large scale, will say, wait a minute, you're reintroducing customer, and it has a different structure. Are you sure? So again, there's a fast failure because every fact that needs to go into such an information model will instantly get checked on pre-existing facts.
Okay.
So again, it's there's no problem on doing fail fast. It's right there.
It's supported.
Yeah, implicit. Yeah.
Yeah. There's one more question here, and that's from Baracha. He says, in many organizations, there's often a disconnect between technical and business stakeholders, leading to misaligned objectives and inefficiencies. How does your book address this challenge, and what methodologies do you suggest in ensuring that groups can communicate effectively and align their goals? Is it part of the data modeling or outside of that?
Yeah, so they usually don't have the same goal. So that's already a misalignment. IT has a goal of building a software, making a solution, building that report, dashboard, whatever. That's the goal. Where business, if you really look at it, wants to have a goal to reach the business mission statement. So that has nothing to do with a dashboard or a database or an application. It's just a tool that they need to actually accomplish their goal. If you view it from a project being, let's build a dashboard, the business goal might be, we need a dashboard that gives us quality data and insights. Now, how do you reach that? Well, again, every fact that is entered in a database or is being handled needs to be verified. Otherwise, you will not get that A-grade quality on your dashboard. So there is a natural fit when you want to talk about goals. But the alignment between the different goals is, okay, do you want it fast? Do you want it cheap? Do you want it of high quality? But this approach is not fast. It can pinpoint the problem very fast. Fixing the miscommunication is a very slow process because it's usually on the business side. Cost effective, not necessarily in a short term, even though a tool can provide you a data model with a click of a button. It might not be cheap because it requires time and effort to align all the systems that are already in place. So I understand the question, but there's really not a solution because as humans, we created this deadlock. We're not in it with the same goals.
You raised quite a nice point there on the reference data. I actually quite liked what you did on the reference data. Now, if I put a scenario together in terms of you saying they want a high quality data in the dashboard for insight, and then you have a data quality person that's going to model that quality expectation in terms of dimensions and concepts and ranges and things like that. Is it not possible a lot of the times to express the facts irrespective of the domain, be it business, data quality, reference data, in what you were doing there with reference data? Can we not translate data quality into a similar structure? Same as what you did with reference data.
You can, and people are doing that, but keep in mind that when you model facts that state a dashboard needs to be of a quality, an A-grade quality, then you're basically modeling a different kind of domain. You're modeling the domain of the quality assurance and the quality department. What we provide, this is interesting. So one of the things that we provide in the approach and in the tool is to say, okay, I'm building this data warehouse and I have customer data or sales data, and I have stated facts about that. But
Yeah.
I know by experience that I have more than one source system that provides that data. Now, in a data warehouse, you would know that in the load process, you need to have a source identifier and all of those technical terms so you can track back where that data comes from. On the business side of things, you would simply state, there's a product sales number, but I know we have multiple systems by that. So I'm making an annotation to that fact type that says, although we communicate with this single fact as an example to be able to verify it, we know that it might be ambiguous.
Yeah.
Because we have more than one source system. So, and it's simply an annotation in metadata with the information model that says there's something fishy here that we haven't solved quite yet. And similarly, facts that state a certain outcome might be annotated with, this needs to be this A-grade quality. With this one cannot be wrong. But again, it's metadata with the facts and with the information models. So some of it is supported by the tool, some of it customizable. It's doable. In a similar fashion, we're constantly we're in the process of thinking about how to deal with privacy.
Right.
Not just the privacy on the data in your production environment that says, well, you cannot see the birth date of a person, but also the privacy on the information elements themselves, because you might be in a high security environment where nobody is allowed to know what you're doing in this department. So they might also not be able to see the information model itself.
Yeah.
And all of these can be stated in facts. You're absolutely right. And this is what I'm doing with the reference data. It's production data, it's standardized data, and it's also the management about that. But in reality, they are different domains, even though they communicate about similar data, but not quite the same context. And this is where data quality is an issue as well. It's always hard because you can only measure quality if you know the context.
Yeah, plus the person's view of who's consuming it. So there's context is.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm doing sales, I don't care where anybody lives. I just want to know where to ship it.
That's right.
But for marketing, it might be, we need to know where people live. So which quality are you measuring?
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Marco, thank you very much. Now it comes the hard part of making a decision is
I don't remember the names of the people that asked.
Just tell me the question and I'll give you the name.
Give me a sec here because I forgot to write it down. I was so busy engaging with the answers. There was a question about the person came online in Vocal. Who was it?
Henry,
came
I
back.
think it was
Yeah.
Henry.
Yes, I'd like
That was on
I
communicating the importance of data modeling and
right, because this touches a continuous quest of myself. How do you address this challenge? So I like
Fantastic.
that. I'd like to honor that effort.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate Marco. Thanks so much for the talk. It was great as usual. And for all those who stayed awake, Mark Atkins, very good.
Thanks, Marco.
Well
Thanks,
done, Mark.
everybody.
Thanks, Hans.